Hello class, so before we get started painting, we're going to go over a couple design concepts that'll be useful for composing your still life. Alright, the first concept we're going to go over is balance. Okay, and this is the distribution of visual weight within your composition. Okay, and visual weight is how much something attracts your eye. So we're talking about distributing it. We're talking about how much, a side of a artwork attracts your attention. Okay, and how do we assess it? We use the concept of an axis. We place it in the middle, and we see how much weight is on each side of the composition. Now, people don't actually draw lines down canvases, nor do they even superimpose them. They usually just look. Is there equal visual weight on the left and right hand sides, or on the top and bottom? Okay, and there's two types of balance that we're going to talk about. The first is horizontal balance. And horizontal balance actually has a vertical axis, and it's talking about the balance from the left and right hand sides. Then there's vertical balance. In vertical balance, you have a horizontal axis, and it's talking about balance from the top to bottom. Okay, so when something's horizontally balanced, that means that there's equal visual weight on the left and right hand sides. And in most cases, most artists aim for equal visual weight on the left and right hand sides. Now, in some cases, an artist may want to create horizontal imbalance, and that's when there's more visual weight on the left or right hand sides. So let's look at this work to the right by Philip Guston called Transition. Would you say there's more visual weight on the right hand side or the left hand side? Okay, there's more visual weight on the right hand side. Okay, and this does create a sense of uneasiness, but it makes sense for what the artist is trying to do. They're trying to describe a moment of transition, and a moment of transition can feel uneasy or imbalanced. So although in most cases, most 2D artists will aim for horizontal balance, equal visual weight on the left and right hand sides, in some cases, the artist may aim for horizontal imbalance. Okay, to intentionally make the viewer feel uneasy. Vertical balance is when we're talking about visual weight on the top and bottom. And artists generally want equal visual weight on the top and bottom of their composition. However, in some cases, artists may want more visual weight on the bottom or more visual weight on the top. So when there's more visual weight on the bottom, it can create a sense of stability. Okay, so think of a statue that has a lot of visual weight on the bottom. It's going to feel pretty stable, like it's not going to topple over. Okay, and you can see that here in this landscape to the left. This big, dark land piece creates a lot of visual weight on the bottom, okay, and it makes this feel stable. Now, there's more visual weight on the top. It can make the work feel unstable and dynamic, like it's open to change. Okay, and that's what you can see right here. There's a lot of visual weight on the top, and it almost seems like it possibly could topple over. I think that's what creates that dynamic quality. There's many things that affect visual weight, and these are just some of them. So one of them is color. So saturated color is generally going to have more visual weight than a muted color. Value. So something that has high value contrast, okay, a big difference between dark and light, will have more visual weight than something with low value contrast. Texture pattern. Something with a rough texture is going to have more visual weight than something that's smooth. Size. So something that's large is going to have more visual weight than something that's small. Complexity. Something that's complicated is going to have more visual weight than something that's simple. Okay, and position. So a large shape that's placed near the middle can be balanced out by a smaller shape that's placed near the edge, closer to the edge of the format. Okay, and really all these things work together. You can't often reduce visual weight to just one element. It's usually multiple elements working together. But these are some things to look for, so you can kind of understand why something's happening within an artwork. So let's look at some examples. In this case, this first one, we have a small square that balances out a large rectangle. how is it that this small square is able to do that? And the reason is because the small square has a lot of contrast with the background, which helps to create a lot of visual weight. So let's look at this one to the right. So we have a smaller shape that's balancing out a larger shape. So why is it that the smaller shape is able to do that? It's because it's complex. Okay, this is more of a simple shape. It's a very complex shape, or a more complex shape, so it's able to balance out this one. Okay, in this case, we have a large rectangle that's balanced out by a smaller square. So, and how is balance created in this one? Assuming that it's balanced. Well, the smaller square has a texture that brings a lot more tension than this smooth square, or relatively smooth. Okay, so let's look at these examples, these real life examples. Okay, so we have this big mountain. Okay, how is it balanced out by the little clouds? Okay, well, there's a lot of little clouds. Okay, and they're textured, so that helps to balance out. So the many little textured clouds balances out the large, smooth, but brightly colored mountain. What about this one to the right, called Funeral Under Umbrellas? Is it balanced? I think it is. Now, how does this one create balance? There's so much visual weight on the right hand side with these dark figures. Okay, and there's many of them. How is attention brought to the left hand side? And it's brought in one way by the orange fire on right here, but also because there's the eye is brought in that direction because of the direction of the rain. So your eye follows these raindrops and goes over to this side. So it's kind of a different way to create balance. What about this one? Okay, if we cut this in half, do you see equal visual weight on both sides? I believe we do. So the reason this one's visually balanced is because of this piece over here. It's pushed so much to the left hand side. Okay, it's small, but it's pushed far to the left hand side, and I think this small form is able to help balance out this over here. Okay, as well as the fact that the cigarette is on the left hand side and it's a focal point. Okay, how's this one visually balanced? Well, this one's visually balanced because there's the same thing on both sides. So this one by definition is visually balanced because the same exact things are on each side of the composition. Okay, and when I say visually balanced, I'm talking about horizontal visual balance. Now let's talk about positive and negative space. So positive space is the space of the subject. Okay, and then negative space is the space around and between the subject. And oftentimes when people are beginning to paint, beginning to draw, beginning to make two-dimensional art, they often forget about the negative space. Okay, it's kind of an afterthought. Like our brain naturally looks for the positive spaces, the positive objects, and kind of ignores the space around it. But these negative spaces are just as important as the positive spaces in contributing to what's expressed by the artwork. Okay, so if we're looking at this work, what is the negative space? It would be this background. Okay, that's above Marat in this. And in this case, I think it's really important. I think this large, empty, negative space above them kind of creates a heavy feeling, at least to me, that contributes to the feeling of death that's in this work. Okay, and really our goal in this class is just to bring your attention to the negative space so that you can make it an active part of your work. Okay, and you can see that by cropping an artwork, okay, the way it's cropped, or the format is, where it ends and begins, changes the shape of the negative space. Okay, because the negative space is a shape, and depending on how you crop it will change that shape. So you see right here, before it's cropped, there's a large negative space in the background, and then when it's cropped, it becomes this shape. Okay, you can see in this work, okay, this shows you what the negative space of this is. Here's an example of two artworks. I want you to consider how the differences in the negative space in the two create a different effect on the viewer. Okay, let's ignore the difference in the color, okay, and just focus on the fact that there's a small Marilyn here that's surrounded by a large negative space, And then there's a larger Marilyn here surrounded by a small negative space. So the relationship between the positive and negative space is different in each. So what difference does this create by having this difference in negative space? I would say that having a smaller negative space, okay, relative to the positive space, makes Marilyn seem more important, more prominent, larger than life. She's vying for our attention in this. Whereas having a large negative space with a smaller Marilyn makes her feel a little more distant, a little quieter, and a little less significant. So that's why it's important to consider your negative space and how you compose your work to create negative space, and what effect it has on the overall artwork.